Your system is obsolete. That's what Nathan Cole heard as the new chief technology officer, Trevor Mason, stood in his office doorway, tablet in hand, not even bothering to sit. After 8 years of building Kelton Legal's internal billing and compliance software, something that had never failed, not once, Nathan found himself being dismissed like a relic of the past. Trevor, a Harvard MBA with a Silicon Valley vocabulary, didn't care that Nathan's system had saved the firm millions or handled cases involving hundreds of thousands of billable hours flawlessly. We're moving to Lexera Cloud, Trevor declared confidently. It's the industry standard. Boeing, Lockheed, even the federal contractors use it. Nathan just stared. He'd seen this before. Firms lured in by shiny dashboards and buzzwords, only to face midnight meltdowns and regulatory disasters. But Trevor had made up his mind. Lexera Cloud was the future, and Nathan's legacy system would be shut down by the end of the quarter. There would be no handoff, no transition plan. His services, Trevor added, would no longer be required after Friday. Nathan didn't argue. He simply nodded, saved his work, and closed his laptop. In his desk drawer sat a set of business cards he had printed years ago but never used. Nathan Cole, independent systems consultant. He had always planned to go independent. He just didn't expect the opportunity to come so soon. Nathan didn't waste time sulking. That wasn't his style. The same evening he was dismissed, he sat in his home office, still dressed in his blazer from work, and began outlining the foundation for his consulting business. The domain was already registered, the business cards printed, and a contact list of colleagues he'd helped over the years waited in a secure spreadsheet. Kelton Legal might have tossed him aside, but Nathan knew what most firms didn't. The legal industry thrives not on buzzwords, but reliability, and he had built exactly that. Quietly, competently, without ever demanding credit. He hadn't planned to end up at Kelton. After his inventory software startup folded during the 2009 recession, he took a role in legal tech just to survive. Within his first week, he saw an attorney lose 8 hours of work due to a corrupted case file. The managing partner at the time, Margaret Kelton, pulled him aside and asked a simple question. Can you build us something that won't let that happen again? Nathan spent 6 months shadowing attorneys, watching how they worked under pressure, late, night filings, last-minute revisions, scrambling to meet court deadlines. What he built was never flashy. It didn't have AI-powered dashboards or gamified billing timers. But it worked. It worked when the internet dropped. It worked when temp staff made mistakes. It worked when every second mattered. His system got its first true test during the Halberd acquisition, a monstrous merger involving 43 attorneys, thousands of documents, and millions in legal fees. The system handled real-time timekeeping, document correlation, expense management, and more. When a skeptical client challenged a $3.2 million invoice, Nathan generated a fully itemized breakdown in 12 minutes. The bill was paid in full. Word got around. Other firms tried to poach him. Software vendors offered to license his code. But Margaret doubled his salary, granted him equity, and said, "Your family now." That all changed when Margaret retired. Her son David took over as managing partner. But the real power soon shifted to Trevor Mason. Trevor didn't ask Nathan how the system worked. He didn't sit in on even one tech audit. Instead, he brought in outside consultants who reviewed documents, but never interviewed end users. Migrate to cloud-based industry standards. Nathan watched quietly as his access was gradually restricted. Requests for upgrades were denied. Budget approvals vanished. Meetings that used to happen weekly became as needed. And then the verdict came: you're done. But Nathan had already anticipated this outcome. That's why those business cards were ready. Why his backup system was stored separately. Why even now, he was crafting a pitch deck not to save Kelton Legal, but to help firms just like it avoid exactly this kind of disaster. He didn't know when the phone would ring, but he knew it would, because Trevor Mason didn't just fire an employee. He removed the one person who actually understood how everything at Kelton ran, and when things broke, they'd realized just how expensive modernization could be. 3 weeks passed. Nathan had just finished a meeting with a small Denver-based firm looking to overhaul their billing system when his phone rang. It was a number he hadn't saved, but he recognized the area code instantly. Kelton Legal. He let it ring twice before answering. Nathan speaking. "Nathan, it's Grace from Kelton. Grace Morales. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, but we need help." Grace was one of the senior paralegals, the kind who kept everything running behind the scenes. She'd always been respectful, always treated support staff like human beings. That mattered to Nathan. "What's going on?" he asked, already sensing the chaos on the other end of the line. "It's the Morrison case. Our system just lost everything. All the billing data for the past 3 months. Trial starts Monday and we can't pull any records." Nathan's eyes narrowed. The Morrison case had been one of the biggest class actions Kelton had handled in years. And his system, it had tracked that case flawlessly before he left. "What's Verdant Legal saying?" "They're blaming a synchronization error. Their offshore support team said the data isn't lost, just temporarily inaccessible. But it's been 6 hours. We've got nothing." Trevor's panicking. Of course he was. Nathan could practically hear the blood draining from the man's face. "Let me guess," Nathan said. "No, they're wondering if I can consult, just temporarily." Grace hesitated. "Yes. Business continuity, they're calling it." He smirked. "My rate's $300 an hour." Grace didn't flinch. "When can you be here?" "I'll be there in 30. He hung up, slid open the drawer of his desk, and grabbed the slim case that held his development laptop. Everything he needed to bring his system back online was in that machine. And while Trevor had kicked him out, someone in that office had had the good sense to preserve his environment on a backup terminal. By the time Nathan walked into Kelton's reception, the place felt like a war zone. Staff whispering around cubicles, junior attorneys scrambling between floors. Tension hung in the air like fog. Grace met him at the door, eyes wide with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "It's bad?" "Worse than we thought. Judge Patterson gave us a deadline, 5 p.m. tomorrow, or she'll sanction us for discovery violations." Nathan didn't waste time. He walked straight to Conference Room B, his old workspace, and booted up the system. Within 5 minutes, he had access to the complete Morrison file, detailed time-tracking expense logs and communication records. Everything was there, organized, intact, ready to be compiled. 10 minutes later, he handed Grace a printed report, 847 hours of attorney time to 342 hours of paralegal support. Over 150,000 in verified expenses. Court formatted and time-stamped. Grace flipped through the pages, blinking. "They told us this would take 2 days, if they could recover the data at all." Nathan leaned back in his chair. "They built their system in the cloud. Mine stores everything locally first. Redundant backups, offline ready. When their network crashes, everything downstream fails. But my system, it never blinked." And as Nathan looked through the glass wall toward Trevor pacing in his office, he realized something with absolute clarity. This wasn't a temporary fix. This was the beginning of the reckoning. Nathan worked through the night. Once the Morrison case was stabilized, new requests came flooding in like a broken dam. Quarter-end billing reports, client invoicing, archived financials for an upcoming audit. And then came the one that made him pause: the partnership profit distribution reports. These weren't just numbers. These were the lifeblood of the firm, the formulas that determined how much each founding partner took home. If Verdant Legal had corrupted or lost that data, it wouldn't just be Trevor's problem. It could trigger a full-blown mutiny from the people who actually owned the firm. Grace knocked gently on the conference room door around 9 p.m. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice low. Nathan didn't look up from the screen. "Worse than they know. Verdant Legal didn't just fail to import the formulas. They destroyed the relationships between data points. The logic's gone. Hours, credits, seniority rankings, scattered." She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. "Can you fix it?" "I can rebuild the reports from the backups. But it's not just about retrieving numbers. It's about restoring confidence." He kept working until well past midnight. At 1:47 a.m., he finally leaned back and stared at the complete reports. Quarterly profit allocations down to the cent. The system he'd built over 8 years had automated every single calculation, weighted billable hours, origination bonuses, expense accountability, all tailored to Kelton's unique culture and legacy practices. Verdant Legal had treated it all like junk data. The next morning, Nathan walked into the firm carrying 3 neatly bound report packets and a backup drive. He didn't need to announce himself. Grace was already waiting at the elevator. "They've moved the partner meeting up to 10:00 a.m. Everyone's on edge." Trevor tried to deflect blame onto Verdant, but the partners know something's off. "Do they know the reports are ready?" Nathan asked. "Not yet." Grace smiled. "You'll tell them." At exactly 10:00, Nathan entered the main conference room. 8 partners sat around the long table. Trevor was at the far end, his face pale, hands clasped tightly in front of him like a man waiting for sentencing. "I suck." David Kelton, the managing partner, greeted him with a firm handshake. "We hear you've been helping us stay afloat." Nathan placed the reports on the table. "These are your complete quarterly distributions, accurate to the same standards you've had for 8 years. The partners flipped through the data. It was all there, every billable hour, every adjusted rate, every profit-sharing breakdown. One of the founding partners looked up. "This is exactly what we used to get." "How is that possible?" "I rebuilt them using the original system, the one that was called obsolete." David glanced down the table. "Trevor, do you have anything to add?" Trevor cleared his throat. "Verdant Legal is still in the optimization phase. These are temporary setbacks." "Temporary setbacks," David repeated, holding up the report. "You replaced a system that worked flawlessly with one that failed in every measurable way. And now we're paying Isaac 3 times his old rate to fix the damage." "Doesn't sound temporary to me." Trevor said nothing. Nathan sat quietly. He didn't need to gloat. The numbers spoke louder than any speech he could give. This was no longer about technology. It was about trust, and who had earned it. By noon that same day, Nathan had moved beyond damage control and into full system forensics. While the partners were still murmuring over the accuracy of his profit reports, he quietly requested a cloned version of the data environment Verdant Legal had deployed. Grace helped facilitate access through a shared administrative credential, one that Trevor apparently hadn't thought to revoke. What Nathan discovered next wasn't just sloppy. It was borderline negligent. Nearly 40% of the firm's legacy billing data hadn't made it into the Verdant platform at all. Worse, many of the custom data fields, like non-billable client hours, charitable service logs, and internal pre-trial strategy sessions, had been discarded during the migration as non-essential. These weren't fluff. They were part of what helped Kelton pass its federal compliance audits every year. But the worst part, the custom allocation formulas, the very logic that differentiated Kelton's billing and compensation models, were gone, not corrupted, not misfiled, just deleted. Verdant Legal had treated the data schema like it was interchangeable with any other small firm template, and Trevor had approved it. Nathan documented everything, line by line, timestamp by timestamp. He backed up the clone, encrypted it, and stored a copy on an external SSD he never left unattended. Later that afternoon, Grace knocked again, this time with a mix of urgency and discomfort. "Trevor wants to meet," she said. "And private?" "Yes." "Conference room C." Nathan packed up his laptop and followed. When he stepped into the room, Trevor was already pacing. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Look," Trevor started. "I know things didn't go smoothly, but let's not make this personal." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "It's not personal. It's professional. That's what makes it worse." Trevor chuckled nervously. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me sweat." "I'm not here to watch you fail, Trevor. I'm here because I care about this firm. And you replaced a reliable, tailored system with a black box you didn't understand and didn't test." Trevor leaned in. "Look, I've been getting pressure from the board. They wanted us to look more tech-forward. Verdant gave us a killer deal to be their showcase client." Nathan folded his arms. "How much?" $800,000 a year for a 5-year license," Trevor muttered. Nathan didn't blink. "And no one on the board knows that you used to work for them, do they?" That was it, the flinch. Barely noticeable, but it was there. Trevor's jaw tensed, and his eyes dropped for just a second too long. Nathan's voice was steady now. "I'm not here to destroy you, Trevor. But I'm not going to protect you either. You made your decisions. Now the partners deserve the truth." Trevor's facade crumbled. "What do you want?" Nathan stared him down. "I want you to stop hiding behind buzzwords and admit that you gambled with this firm's integrity. And I want you to step back before someone else forces you to." As he left the room, Nathan knew the real audit hadn't even started yet. But this time, he'd be the one holding the flashlight. By the next morning, the wheels were already turning faster than Trevor could manage. Nathan arrived at Kelton Law early, armed with a full packet of reports and an encrypted flash drive. The managing partner, Henry Caldwell, had personally requested an update before the scheduled board meeting. Grace led Nathan into the executive conference room. Only this time, Trevor wasn't the one at the head of the table. Morning. Nathan, Henry said, gesturing toward a chair. We've reviewed your audit findings. Impressive work. Nathan gave a modest nod. Thank you. I've highlighted the discrepancies and the schema losses in these documents, but I think you'll want to focus on page 12. As Henry flipped through the report, his expression darkened. Custom billing fields wiped. Yes, sir. Along with the profit-sharing logic, Verdant Legal's import tools treated our custom structure as non-standard, so their migration process discarded everything it couldn't map to a template. One of the senior partners, Evelyn Marks, leaned forward. Are you saying the entire profit allocation system is now unusable? Unless we restore the original platform, Nathan confirmed. It's not just unusable, it's unrecoverable without months of redevelopment. A heavy silence fell across the room. Trevor, who had just entered carrying his laptop, froze as every head turned toward him. Trevor, Henry said, his voice controlled, you vouched for Verdant Legal. I did. And I still believe it's the right long-term solution. Trevor replied, eyes darting. This is a standard transition hiccup. Evelyn cut him off. A hiccup doesn't delete our entire compensation algorithm. Trevor's confident posture faltered. We're working closely with Verdant. They've promised a patch to restore the custom fields. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You mean the same patch they estimated would take 6 months and cost an extra $300? Henry sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. Trevor, is there something else we should know? That was it. The moment of reckoning. Nathan slid a small stack of documents across the table. These are public records linking Strategian Consulting, Verdant Legal's parent company, to Trevor's previous employer history. That connection was never disclosed to the board. Trevor's face drained of color. You mean to tell me, Evelyn said, voice rising, we committed to a 5-year, nearly $1 million contract with a vendor you have personal ties to, and you didn't think we should know? It wasn't? It's not? Trevor stammered. It wasn't like that. Nathan stayed silent. The room didn't need more words. Just clarity. Henry closed the folder slowly. We'll be convening a closed session this afternoon. In the meantime, Trevor, hand over administrative access to all Verdant-related systems, effective immediately. Trevor asked, barely above a whisper.
Yes.
Henry replied firmly. We need stability. And Nathan here seems to be the only person delivering it. As Trevor stepped out, the door closed with a soft but definitive click. Nathan exhaled, the tension in his shoulders finally loosening. He hadn't planned on exposing a career. But when a leader gambled with other people's livelihoods for ego and optics, consequences had to follow. And now, for the first time since being fired, Nathan wasn't just back in the building. He was at the center of its future. By the time Nathan sat down at his old workstation, now reassembled in Conference Room C, it felt like walking into a time capsule that still hummed with purpose. The system he'd built, once cast aside as legacy, was still intact thanks to one quiet decision. Grace, the lead paralegal, had preserved a complete copy of the architecture before the firm's migration. She met him at the door with a mug of black coffee and a knowing smile. Figured you might need this. You just became my favorite person here, Nathan said, settling into the chair and launching the environment. Within minutes, the familiar dashboard flickered to life, live metrics, error-free logs, local backups. Like clockwork, it all returned, quietly efficient, effortlessly reliable. Henry Caldwell stepped into the room shortly after. How long until we're back to full operations? Nathan checked his notes. 4 hours for restoration. 2 more for system verification and testing. We'll be fully operational by close of business today. Henry nodded, clearly relieved. The board approved full reinstatement of your system. Verdant Legal's contract is being reviewed for breach. You've got full access and authorization. Understood, Nathan said. I'll also begin documenting all discrepancies and system failures tied to the migration for legal purposes. Henry paused at the door. And Nathan, about Trevor. Nathan looked up. Officially, he's been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. Unofficially, the partners want you to lead this transition. On your terms. Nathan gave a short nod. I won't let you down. And he meant it. For the next several hours, the firm buzzed with restrained urgency. Nathan moved between systems like a conductor fine, tuning an orchestra. Grace coordinated data recovery while the junior IT techs followed Nathan's instructions to re-establish document indexing and billing APIs. The restored platform reconnected seamlessly with the client portals, accounting software, and internal document management systems. By 4:30 p.m., everything was live, no errors, no lost data, no excuses. Henry returned just as Nathan finished his final checks. "Everything stable, more than stable," Nathan replied. "I've already pushed out 2 back-end optimizations I'd been sitting on for months. The system's running 18% more efficiently than before the migration." Henry chuckled. "Figures. You get fired and somehow make everything better." Nathan stood and extended a hand. "I build things that last, Henry. That's all I've ever done." Henry shook his hand firmly. "And now you'll be compensated for it, properly." As Nathan began packing up his bag, Grace poked her head in. "Oh, and one more thing. Verdant Legal called. They wanted to offer you a position." Nathan smirked. "Tell them I charge $500 an hour now." Grace laughed. "Already did." Outside the window, the mountains gleamed against the fading Colorado light. For Nathan, this wasn't just a comeback. It was a confirmation. He hadn't failed. The firm had simply forgotten the value of quiet excellence. Now, they were finally learning to listen. Nathan didn't waste time after restoring the original system. Instead of simply handing the keys back, he proposed something bold, an evolution of everything he'd built over the past decade, tailored specifically for Kelton's future. That Friday morning, the partners gathered in the main boardroom for what was supposed to be a post-mortem on the Verdant failure. But Nathan had something else in mind. He walked to the front, connected his laptop to the projector, and opened a presentation titled "Kelcor Your System, Reimagined." "Verdant Legal offered you a cookie-cutter platform," Nathan began, his voice steady, measured. "It didn't understand your culture, your billing methods, or your ethics. Kelcor is the opposite. It was born here, shaped by your attorneys, your staff, and your clients." He walked them through the upgrades: a secure client portal with live billing transparency, a predictive invoicing engine based on historical case data, and integrated compliance tools that automatically flagged high-risk entries. And most impressively, a visual dashboard that allowed each partner to see their team's contributions in real time, with no manual data entry required. "This is what happens when we stop chasing trends and start building for trust," Nathan said. "I've spent the last few nights turning a restoration into a foundation. This isn't a patch. It's an answer." The room fell silent. Evelyn Marks, one of the longest-serving partners, leaned forward. "How much would a full implementation cost?" "Less than what we paid for Verdant's license in 6 months," Nathan said without missing a beat. "And this time, you're not renting the software. You own it outright." David Kelton, seated at the head of the table, nodded slowly. "And who maintains it?" Nathan smiled. "I do. Along with a small team I've started assembling. Former in-house techs, some independent consultants, folks who understand both law and code. I'll serve as lead systems architect, reporting directly to the managing partner." Henry Caldwell looked around the room. Any objections? There were none. By the end of the meeting, a vote was held. Unanimous. Kelcor would become Kelton Legal's permanent platform. Verdant Legal's contract was terminated effective immediately, and Nathan's consulting role was formalized into a new executive position, Director of Legal Technology Strategy. As he shook hands with each partner, Nathan felt a deep, quiet satisfaction, not born from revenge, but from validation. Not only had he been proven right, but he had done so without grandstanding, without bitterness. Just skill, clarity, and resolve. Later that evening, as he sat at home reviewing the implementation timeline, Nathan's phone buzzed again. This time it was from a rival law firm across town. "Word is, you saved Kelton's neck," the message read. "We could use someone like you." Nathan chuckled and put the phone down. Not yet. First, he had a legacy to rebuild on his terms. The following Monday, Nathan arrived at Kelton Legal's downtown office earlier than usual. But this time it wasn't to put out fires. It was to begin laying the foundation for a new era. His first task: conducting a full audit of the firm's remaining digital infrastructure. Verdant Legal's abrupt removal had left tangled remnants of incomplete data pathways, broken APIs, and corrupted sync logs. Nathan, ever meticulous, documented every vulnerability and mapped out a phased rebuild that prioritized stability and data integrity. Unlike the flash and dazzle approach of cloud vendors, Nathan's style was quiet, surgical, and transparent. He didn't just restore the firm's old capabilities, he elevated them. Within 2 weeks, his new platform, Kelcore, was not only stable but outperforming Verdant's promised benchmarks. System latency dropped by 40%. Billing error rates fell to zero. Real-time reporting allowed partners to check client metrics with a single click. The firm's paralegals and support staff noticed it first. "This feels like the old days, but smoother," one whispered in the break room. The junior associates followed, grateful that the system finally worked the way they worked, not how an out-of-touch CTO imagined they should. But the biggest shift came from the top. At the end of the quarter, when the partnership distributions were calculated, every figure matched Nathan's forecast. No discrepancies, no delays. When David Kelton handed out the reports in the quarterly partners meeting, he said just one thing: "This is what trust and expertise buys us." Trevor Walsh's absence was never directly addressed. Officially, he had resigned to pursue other opportunities. Unofficially, the board had quietly voted to void all technology contracts initiated during his tenure, citing breach of operational confidence. Verdant Legal's representatives didn't protest. They knew the system had failed. Meanwhile, Nathan's quiet comeback was making waves beyond Kelton's walls. 3 more law firms contacted him within a month, each with a similar story: hasty migrations, poor support, and mounting losses. They didn't want trend-chasing vendors. They wanted someone who listened, someone who built with purpose. Someone like Nathan. He didn't rush to say yes. Kelton came first. Before expanding, he wanted to ensure his system could scale while still retaining its integrity. So he began assembling a lean team: 2 trusted developers from his early startup days, a systems analyst who had left a major cloud vendor out of frustration, and an old paralegal who understood the ground-level chaos most programmers never see. They weren't a flashy crew, but they knew how to build things that worked. By the start of the next quarter, Kelcore was officially branded and registered as its own entity, independent from Kelton Legal, but with an exclusive long-term contract in place. The system was now in demand across Denver and Boulder, with Nathan positioned not just as a consultant, but a quiet pioneer of legal tech done right. And the best part, he did it without shouting, without saboteurs, without burning bridges. He simply let results speak louder than buzzwords. 6 months later, Nathan stood in the new Boulder office, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. A room once imagined only in blueprints was now filled with quiet energy. Attorneys reviewing cases, paralegals navigating Kelcore's seamless interface, and support staff who no longer dreaded system crashes. It all worked, and it worked well. He never expected his so-called obsolete code to become the backbone of a multi-office law firm. But what started as a personal redemption had grown into something bigger: a movement toward substance over hype, trust over titles, and people over platforms. As he looked out at the snow-capped Rockies in the distance, his phone buzzed. It was another message from Jennifer. "New firm in Fort Collins just reached out, asked if you're accepting new clients. I told them only if they believe in doing things right." Nathan smiled. Sometimes, being quietly excellent is enough. In a world obsessed with trends and titles, don't underestimate the value of reliability, integrity, and experience. Shiny solutions may promise the world, but it's the work built on understanding, not ego, that stands the test of time. Have you ever been replaced by someone who talked a big game but couldn't deliver? Share your story in the comments. We want to hear it. And if you believe in standing your ground, building things that last, and letting your work speak louder than any buzzword, hit that like, subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss another story that proves real value never goes out of style.